What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. We need to talk more about this Marco Rubio speech at the UN Security Council. First, let's qualify Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is a Cuban. His first language is Spanish. Marco Rubio is the architect of disenfranchising his own people. So in the manner in which we would use Cunarian for our people, Marco Rubio is the ultimate Cunarian for the Cuban people. Because while he's pandering to white supremacy in order to gain power, right, his people are being sent back to Cuba, and Cuba is being disenfranchised. Cuba is being attacked economically via Venezuela and choked out, and his people are starving, while this Cuban turncoat goes to Europe and panders to white supremacy. I want everybody to remember that Spanish is a European language, and that Marco Rubio has shown you that there are certain Latinos, because within the Latino ethnic group, it's a linguistic ethnic group, meaning they are connected by a common language, not race, all right, except for all the white folks that graped Native Americans and Africans. Marco Rubio is a European. Many Latinos are strictly European. There's just white people who speak Spanish, like there's white people who speak French, white people who speak English, etc., etc. But in this really racist speech, right, because, you know, Marco Rubio is competing with J.D. Vance to be the next president of the United States, which absolutely can't happen. Absolutely cannot happen. We have to stop right now, because Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance have proven, right, because J.D. Vance is a Powerpuff cup hold, all right, who sold his soul to white supremacy. Both these guys have zero spine. There's no way we can allow these two turncoat weirdo cup hold fools to be the leader of us, because they're more dangerous than Trump, because they have enough competence to listen to the evil racist white people behind the door that's giving all the orders, and they're not going to be as erratic as Donald Trump. We have to stop this immediately. Listen, Europe will never, the white Western world will never come. It's over. All right? And this is their last gasp. And we know what Europeans do when they lose power. They scorch earth. And they got two plans: scorch earth or scorch everybody. All right? Because that's it. Scorch everybody or scorch earth. All right? So without further ado, let's listen. And I'm going to put some people who will agree with him. So you can see what they look like. All right? We need to understand, we are in this is it. This is it. If you ain't, stop playing. It's time to turn the TV off. All right, your entertainment TV. It's time to stop listening to the bullshit celebrity junk. It's time to get serious, because this is serious. It's time for play later, but right now we ain't got time to play, because these people ain't playing. You understand what I'm saying? These people are not playing. This is real. And no amount of closing your eyes, putting your head in a hole, or entertaining yourself and act like it ain't happening, gonna stop it from happening. We playing, they not playing. Understand that. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. It's Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach them. I'm out.
We can no longer place the so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored, and we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world. And we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate.
I'm going to show you how Chinese people reacted to Marco Rubio's speech on Western expansion. Let's first hear what he said.
For 5 centuries, the West had been expanding to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame, not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. That America is charting the path for a new century of prosperity, and that once again, we want to do it together with you, our cherished allies and our oldest friends.
Let's look at some Chinese comments. Reject colonial shame. Colonizers of the world. Expand. Wow. If they don't steal world loot, they become weak. They call themselves a beacon, but in reality, they are pirates holding up torches. Even if they wear a tuxedo on the outside, they're still pirates at heart. Wow. While there are still people down here who are so moved they are in tears. I seriously can't hold it together. Responses. The people applauding below think they'll get a seat at a table, but actually, they are on the menu. War is the ultimate means for capitalism to sustain itself when nothing else works. Woo.
The United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world. And we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate. This is the path that President Trump and the United States has embarked upon. It is the path we ask you here in Europe to join us on. It is a path we have walked together before and hope to walk together again.
Marco Rubio is so close to the power he has always needed to feel whole. He is bending it like Beckham to try and get there, and I don't think he's going to. Marco Rubio is an imperialist who is willing to sacrifice all sorts of values and dignities of his own and anyone else who gets in his way if it means he gets to play conqueror for a bit, which is literally the story of every person in the Trump administration. This fear that I am sympathetic to far more than most people in my lane, this fear of losing this culture that they call common culture, but really just historically means white. I think it's a genuine concern to have. We all, and I grew up in it, have enjoyed in America and the West, as long as we were white, this just ease and good times and sports and apple pie, and everyone you come in contact with speaks the same language, which is very nice and convenient. It's been a very nice, again, if you've been white, easy, comfortable world. And I understand being afraid of that going away. Here, though, is my problem with that. This is by our own design. We colonized, we looted and exploited, we bombed and destabilized all of these lands. Okay, and a lot of other verbs that we won't even say, we won't even talk about. We shipped people here involuntarily. Okay, whoops. So if we can't even bring ourselves to acknowledge that properly and apologize for it, all of a sudden now saying shout out everybody. We had fun, but party's over. Get out and don't come back. That's not going to work. Okay. Also, American culture as it exists in their minds is white. But it's not, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be Christian white culture. Almost everything else can stay the same. If you strip those things out, or if people who come here don't want to participate in the Christian or the white part, almost everything else stays the same about American culture. Should immigrants make their best effort to assimilate? Yes. But help them. Be welcoming. Take them to an SEC game in the fall. I don't know. Encourage them to learn the dominant language instead of just making fun of them and slurring at them when they don't. If these people, if Marco and JD would try sharing, gave sharing and tolerance a try, and then maybe just unclenching their assholes a bit, maybe they could actually enjoy living in a common shared culture with people who come from different ones. A lot of us do it every day automatically already.
The United States just declared war on anti-colonial movements and laid out its plans to use military force to bomb sovereign nations into submission. It's time to talk about Marco Rubio's speech. Miami Cuban and brother-in-law to a narco trafficker, Marco Rubio told European leaders that America is rejecting global cooperation in favor of pure, unhinged power. Rubio dismissed what he called rules-based order as an idea that was a failed idea and argued that the U.S. will no longer let international law or its institutions get in its way of pillaging and plundering. And to prove his point, he bragged about using American-made bombs and special forces in Gaza, Iran, and Venezuela. He argued that military force and genocide is the only language the world understands. Now, his speech was a clear signal that the U.S. plans to act like an empire, with or without its allies. And Rubio didn't stop at foreign policy. He blamed foolish trade deals for hurting American workers and called for a new Western economic bloc that can dominate the global South. He wants to carve up the world into economic territories controlled by the West. He even painted migration as an urgent threat to the survival of Western civilization itself, calling immigration an attack on Western civilization that must be stopped. Now, the speech also painted a cozy, romantic, and revisionist picture of history. He celebrated European explorers and settlers who discovered new worlds and brought Christianity to the Americas. And of course, his version of the past completely ignores the genocide, slavery, and theft that built those empires. Now, Rubio's message is simple. The U.S. is tired of playing nice, even though it was never really all that nice to begin with. It wants allies who are strong, proud of their colonial past, and ready to join America in a new era of pillaging and plundering. Rubio's vision is one that falls in line with American imperialism. The West has always pillaged, plundered, bombed, and destabilized other countries, all for the crime of fighting for sovereignty. But instead of hiding it, this administration is saying the quiet part out loud.
Marco Rubio, who is the Secretary of State and is also responsible for the starvation campaign happening in Cuba right now, gave a fascist speech at Munich. In his fascist speech, he talked about how the rules-based order must be abandoned to protect the West, which is funny coming from the United States, as if we'd invade Afghanistan and stay there for 20 years, or invade, the global South for decades and decades in the name of maintaining democracy and stopping the spread of communism. Obviously, the rules-based order only applies to Western nations. He talked about how immigration was a scourge to Western civilization and it needs to be stopped, as if he isn't a Cuban immigrant himself. As if, immigrants from the global South and the resources stolen from their home nations aren't responsible for the wealth in the United States and in various European countries. And there is, plenty of other evil neocon shit that Rubio said that various European leaders applauded to. Here's the long and short of it. They want war forever. Western leaders are sick of liberalism. So am I, but not for the same reason. I'm a socialist, they're fascist. These nations, especially the United States, as you've seen over the past 2 years, wants to go back to their hardcore colonialist ways. They want to rape, plunder, and keep the global South submitted. They don't want any anti-colonialist movements starting. They want them to remain slaves for the rest of their lives. This is what I call the Israelification of the West. If we continue to go down this path, everything that Israel has done to the Palestinians, to Gaza and the West Bank, the West will take all of that money that they use to support Israel in their evil endeavors and push that to the rest of the world, including their own citizens.
This is Marco Rubio. Oh, I'm sorry, not this. This is Marco Rubio, Marco Antonio Rubio, que habla español. That's his first language. He grew up speaking like his whole house and neighborhood. As of January 2025, he serves as the first Latino U.S. Secretary of State. He should be proud, but he just wants to be Secretary of State, not first Latino of anything. He doesn't wear this t-shirt or this t-shirt. He wears a suit with the American flag, as he should. And he was at the summit talking like a white guy. It was a beautiful supremacist speech. He actually looked through history, and he probably knows history. I underestimated the guy. And bragged about those times when the West was expanding, genociding everybody else out of the way. And he lamented the fact that right there where he's speaking, in Germany, the Western Empire fell into a steep decline. And he said all of that in English with that hiss that you can't get rid of when he used to say Zaragoza.
For 5 centuries before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding.
Correct.
Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions, and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years.
Ladies and gentlemen, Marco Rubio went absolutely nuts on the United Nations in Germany. In contrast to AOC, this was an actually amazing speech. It was absolutely incredible. He went after the United Nations, and he was explaining kind of the average American's thought process and what we think about the world at large. And he did such a fantastic job explaining this. I want you to look at this. Marco Rubio unloads on useless United Nations in Germany, has no answers to world's biggest crisis. At the 2026 Munich Security Conference in Germany, Secretary of State Marco Rubio delivered a thunderous rebuke of the failed globalist order, calling out international institutions like the United Nations for their stunning impotence in the face of war, terrorism, and global instability. Standing before America's European allies at one of the most consequential geopolitical forums in the world, Rubio made it clear the era of outsourcing sovereignty to unelected global bureaucracies is over. We've had it. I absolutely love this. We see what a complete tragedy this has become. They were trying to do this stuff. They were trying to do it behind our backs. They're trying to pull the wool over our eyes, lie to us. Then we had COVID. Then we had these weird elections. And most people are standing back in shock, like, what is going on? And this ties into everything that Marco Rubio is saying at the Munich Security Conference. Rubio laid out a brutal reality check for the internationalist class that has spent decades pushing a so-called rules-based global order. And this is something that you might have heard AOC talk about. AOC also gave a talk, a little few-minute talk at the Munich Security Council, and she has the exact opposite vision for the United States and for this new world order. She wants to go back and march in lockstep with this rules-based global order. That's what she said in her speech. So we have competing visions right now in the United States with people like AOC and, of course, Zohran Mamdani. They're wanting to go back to this new world order that the vast majority of Americans were shocked to see start to come to fruition in the United States, and they pushed back against it by electing Donald Trump. And then you have AOC and Zohran Mamdani and those types that want to go back to doing this stuff that is just absolutely terrible for our society. While America and Europe hollowed out their industrial base and surrendered control of critical supply chains. Now let's go to this video. This is a video of Marco Rubio talking about this, guys, and it's literally worth every single minute to watch. It's absolutely fascinating. Take a listen to Marco Rubio absolutely excoriating the United Nations. Take a listen.
And so this is why we Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent in our council. This is why President Trump demands seriousness and reciprocity.
America may have got applause here rather than gasps at the Munich Security Conference.
Our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe.
But that's not because anything has substantially changed. Look, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio clearly was trying to package his message here in a bid to make an audience still traumatized by the Greenland debacle, where President Trump threatened to use military force against Danish territory to try and rekindle what remains of the transatlantic relationship. He appealed to their shared sense of history, but ultimately, while saying how their history was intertwined and how America would always be a child of Europe, he harked back to the need for shared Christian spiritual values, appealing to far-right populist opposition leaders ultimately here in Europe. Very much the same message, saying America's willing to go it alone if Europe doesn't essentially change itself and join them on the Trump path. A real sense of relief, though, that the tone wasn't as overtly hostile as it was last year. But make no mistake, I think most people here saw through the speech to the underlying change here, essentially saying that the culture wars of MAGA are something that may need to get fought out here in Europe.
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan!
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.